As the January 6th hearings highlight our nation's political divisions, several former military leaders, including retired Army General Stan McChrystal and Army General Doug Lute, are urging Americans to recommit to this country's core principles. They are part of a group called Team Democracy that wants people to pledge that elections are conducted according to the rule of law without partisan bias. The general spoke with senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge about the new initiative and why they believe our democracy faces its greatest threat since the Civil War.
I actually think that this is as dangerous a time as we've seen in our lifetime.
Retired Army General Stan McChrystal, who once led U.S. forces around the globe, including Afghanistan, sees America's current divisions as an issue of national security.
Because you see the symptoms of people who are disassociated from the legitimacy of the government. They are starting to question basic things like, was an election outcome valid?
I'm beginning to see, as Stan suggested, these fissures.
Retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute also served globally over a 4-decade career, including as U.S. ambassador to NATO.
These tiny fractures, these small fractures that, because of our international experience, we understand can widen and can divide America. It can actually present opportunities for our opponents.
It's not every day that you have two retired generals sit down and talk about the state of our elections. Why are you coming forward?
Our enemies would like nothing more than to find us not unified, to find us fragmented and unable to be the kind of America that they have faced before or relied on if they're allies.
I think Stan and I have seen democracies, fledgling democracies overseas, struggle to find their feet. And at least for me, I see some of those warning signs today in America.
As seasoned observers of conflict, these generals joined Team Democracy to highlight core principles.
The idea is to give every American a reminder and a commitment that safe and fair elections are fundamental to our nation and democracy.
The election was rigged, it was stolen.
Without the backing of former President Trump and his supporters, how can this work?
Well, it starts with the grassroots movement. Every American has got to step back and say, what do I really believe in about our nation? And that is that we are a democracy. And what signals that? The fact that I believe and participate in the elections.
The thing that unites us is that before we were supporters of President Trump or President Biden or Obama, we were Americans. We are Americans.
Fearful of America's military superiority, these generals say our adversaries use information as a weapon to mislead, confuse, and divide.
If I were an adversary of the United States, I'd want to go after two things. First would be our political unity, our ability to make unified decisions and execute things. But I'd also want to go after our legitimacy as a nation that other nations want to emulate.
From an intelligence perspective, why are Americans so divided?
When people get messages that are very direct and often they are either intentionally or unintentionally incorrect, it changes their beliefs. And so they start to hold fundamental ideas that are contrary to facts.
It actually opens opportunities for those who would do us harm. And eventually their aim is to make us so divided that we're internally consumed, we're self-absorbed with our own problems, and we're unable to address issues overseas.
Recent CBS News polling underscores the divisions, with most Americans expecting violence after future presidential elections.
This is not the America that we've come to expect of ourselves.
I think if we look in cases where people think violence is an option or even an obligation, then we are starting to have drifted somewhere that we see in other countries far away, but it's suddenly come home, and we need to pay close attention to it.
And once that drift begins, it's very difficult to reverse it. So now is the time, as a preventive measure, we need to get in front of these divides and try to cement ourselves back together.
The generals have not announced a complete plan of action yet, but believe asking people from across the political spectrum to recommit to core democratic principles is a good starting point. And the group cites research that public pledges can drive behavior, especially when paired with public accountability efforts. Michelle.
The nation is at stake. Catherine, thank you.